And welcome to Conservative Talk.
Why are we still dealing with Iran?
SCOTUS batting 500 in their first week back.
And guess what? Democrats pulled a race card in Alabama.
And over in the conspiracy corner, Buck's talking about how the Democrats are actually wanting Putin to press that big red button. So, yeah.
It's going to be that kind of show.
So, welcome back to Conservative Talk. My name's Justin.
And this is Jamie.
And as always, we always like to encourage and remind our viewers to make sure they're hitting the like button and the share button on any of the content that they see on any of the platforms that we do put our productions out on. And making sure you're also hitting the subscribe button. That way you can stay up to date on any of the productions that we put out there. And you'll never miss a single moment of Jamie's wonderful smiling face. And while you're doing that, if you are able to, please go to conservativestalk.org and hit the sponsor tab in the upper right-hand corner or the lower right-hand corner and helping us out with what you're able to. Every little bit goes a very long way in helping Jamie and I to really increase our production value and extend the reach that we do have at the moment. Also, make sure you're signing up for our newsletter that's going to be coming out. We say it every time. It is coming. Hand on the Bible. It is coming. So, Jamie, would you like to start us off with your first reminder?
Don't forget to boycott hometown headlines.
Absolutely.
Enough said. We're almost there, ladies and gentlemen. Won't be long. Continue to boycott them, and then they won't be able to produce any papers.
Sounds reasonable to me. So, what about your second one? Well, your favorite part of the show.
Are you ready?
Let's do it.
I'm ready. 34 days until we cancel Stacey Abrams.
34 days until we never have to do that or say that again.
Yeah, man, about 300 phone calls to help cancel Stacey Abrams today.
Golf clap.
Hey,
every little bit counts.
Everybody helps.
Every little bit counts.
Everybody helps. 300 a day. Keep Stacey away.
There you go. I like it. 300 calls a day. Keep Stacey away.
300 calls a day. Keep Stacey away.
That's the new motto that needs to be ran with. That's
what. Run it.
Yeah, write that one down. Jamie's actually in this moment right now, sending that to the person that oversees these things and to run with that new slogan. I actually really like that. While he's doing that, we're going to roll into these right here, and I want to say thank you to our national affiliate, Net News Network, and what they're really able to help in helping us do, and we're reaching a much broader and wider audience. So Net News Network is a conglomeration of kind of podcast broadcasters, radio recorders, things along that nature that really emphasize just getting the news and getting Americans informed of what's actually going on, not only in their local areas, but across the country. They're a great organization, and I would highly recommend you checking them out and looking into some of their productions. We also want to say a massive thank you to Veterans for America First. Veterans for America First, it's a political grassroots organization that pushes the America First agenda and supports candidates who fight tooth and nail to make sure that America remains the greatest country in the entire world. And they do that through their multimedia platform, and that being Vet Voice. So Vet Voice is their platform where they have content producers that you'll only find information and things on that nature involving the America First policies. And you'll only find creators on there who are on the front line in the political battles and who are fighting in the trenches to ensure and make sure that America remains the greatest country that we know her to be. So, with that in mind, let's roll right into our first topic that we were talking about. So, why exactly are we still in Iran?
Honestly, that's my real question. For the longest time, I thought that this was more of a strategic thing against China, but clearly it's not. And the reason why I say that is because opium, and opium being a large sacrament in their religious beliefs and things of that nature, and a lot of it's grown in Iran, Afghanistan, that type of thing. So staying in those areas inside of the region could have been a way of controlling that market, but clearly that's not it. So now I don't know.
Well, I mean, so if you have been living under a rock and you're not aware of what's going on in Iran, so right at this particular moment, Iran is in a massive state of turmoil and upheaval.
Yep.
There are protests that are going across the entire country right now. The latest number that I saw just from some of the reporting agencies, that upwards of 83 to 92 people have been murdered by both the Iranian Guard and this morale police that had brutally beaten a 22-year-old woman for
Not
dress code violations.
Yep. And people are upset. What was really impressive was that, you know, Iran soccer team was in the World Cup and all that kind of stuff, and they removed the flag or covered it when they were doing their national anthem as a sign of their professional team protesting. Now, you know, when we look at that from an American standpoint, you know, we're like, that's against freedom, because when you see something like this, here's a country who is fighting for the freedoms that we have, which is why it's so upsetting when you see someone disrespect the American flag. But when you see something like this, you're like, you have to champion it. Like this woman, because she chose to uncover her hair and show her face, she was killed
in public. Yeah, not just killed, but was beaten to the point that it killed her.
That's
so. I kind of want to throw a pitch at you, and I was listening to another show, and this really kind of resonated with me. So I can't claim credit for thinking of this this information, and I don't believe we have the copyright abilities to say the show on here. So we're just going to say we're listening to a show. So, what if I were to make the comparison between what Iran is currently doing involving the protests and what we saw in 2020 and 2021 in the U.S.?
Oh, completely different.
Well,
you asked my opinion on why.
Well, so let me jump into that a little bit more on that.
Yeah.
So, for one, Iran has essentially cut off any access to information via the internet. They have no internet access there.
Yep. Similar to Syria.
So they have no ability to find out any information. They have no ability to check and see what's going on in their local areas. They have no ability to put out what their current experiences are and what's going on there. All right. So with that comparison, let's look at how the United States, and one of our main areas of communication being social media, with the big tech censorship and the fact checkers. So because of what we saw with that, a lot of folks were not able to get a lot of that information because these larger big tech organizations are censoring and suppressing a lot of that information. And they were doing so at behest of the United States government.
Yep. Well, the Democratic Party, who's in power of the United States government.
So yes, essentially, the United States government.
Well, and I always want to make that clarification, because this is and not America. You know what I mean? Which is why I, as well as others like yourself and other, like, continue to fight so hard, because the America we know would not stand for this, or the thought of censorship of any kind. You know what I mean? We have seen the brutalities of history throughout this country from every race or creed. But now, to protect other people's feelings, you're telling us that we need to cancel and hide our emotions, or hide judgment, or hide anything else. It's wrong.
Or just not put out anything that goes against the narrative of what the ruling regime wants out.
Yeah, which is literally the role of a dictatorship,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you start looking at what the big tech censorship is, and we've talked about this multiple times, and my total disagreement with. Anyway, these are the same tactics, right? From a socialist standpoint. There's not really a word to describe it other than socialist, right? From a socialist standpoint, that dictatorships and militarized zones do to control their people. Iran uses the same tactics. They don't have an internet, they have a intranet. Syria only pushes out propaganda, Russia only pushes out propaganda, China only pushes out propaganda. You don't get real internet. You're not allowed to see opposing opinions. You're not allowed to see what other people are doing across the world. Like, these are the freedoms that were taken for granted, but
Mm-hmm.
we're going to allow someone to protect the leader's feelings to say that no, this opinion doesn't matter.
Well, I mean, yeah, and then that's in all honesty, that's what a lot of what the fact checkers and what big tech did, and really trying to shape the entire narrative of our country and the national conversations and topics that we really brought up. So I mentioned I had 2 points, and the second one being, so the organization that murdered this young woman is known as the Morale Police. So what they do is they go around and they enforce dress codes.
Sharia law.
Well, the dress code that is demanded under the Islamic text and Sharia law, but they were at the time they were only able to really issue citations. They were able to make arrests, but it was never intended, or supposedly what they say was never intended to go to the level what it did. Although would I would not put it past them that this was not the first instance that this has happened. That being said, we had a we had our ruling regime here go out and tell people to narc or snitch or report their neighbors for violations of what they saw as mandates under the COVID deal, meaning like not are having too many people in their home. If you had too many people in their home, you were encouraged to call the local authorities and tell them that these people were meeting and this was a super spreader event for Thanksgiving Day dinners. You had people that were chasing people down in grocery stores for not wearing a mask correctly.
So we've talked about this multiple. I work for a local government in the state, right? This is when I knew we had a problem. Okay. During that, I will never forget this. It was March 17, 2020, somewhere around there. It was in the teens. I got a call because essential workers were construction, and on these guys' lunch break, they decided to play soccer. A homeowner who was adjacent to this development called, and I kid you not, this person on the phone said, you need to call their supervisor, and you either need to have them sent home, you need to cite them, you need to do something, because they're out here playing soccer and not working, and I'm stuck in my house. And I said, sir, no one told you you couldn't leave your house. You made the choice not to leave your house. And but that's the level of subliminal messaging and propaganda that they're putting on people. And that's how you get an Islamic State that does this, because these people they've enforced citations for so long, people still continue to violate them, so they lead and they harm someone who's innocent, who's just fighting for freedom. And this is the same type of propaganda that goes around in all these regimes.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting to note along that line that this morale police has, I believe it's next year, the Ayatollah there has stripped them of their powers, and that apparently had been done before this incident had happened. But they're no longer able to have arrest powers. They'll still be able to have citations, but it no longer is a law enforcement branch. It becomes a civilian enforcement branch. So you'll now have civilians that will be able to go out and do this. It
Oh,
was
so
a lot of what we're seeing, a lot of what we saw during the lockdowns.
Not just that. That sounds a lot like what the Democrat Party is trying to do here in America now.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah,
they want to take away policing power and replace it with a peacekeeper, right? But all that is a witch hunt, man.
Yeah, and the fact that we're still involved with them as far as this Iran nuclear deal, the fact that we had given them billions of dollars that we had seized at one point in time, and then I said, oh well, under Obama, we'll just give it back to you. No, don't worry about it. Billions of dollars. Then they got together and came up with this just terrible, unenforceable deal that they made, where we still gave them billions of more dollars. Then the next administration coming under Trump cut all of that, and we threw some of the toughest sanctions that they had ever seen in their entire life on them, and that really began to hurt them. And they started to get kind of in shape along the same lines as we saw as every other country that had leanings adverse to what we were wanting done. But now we have the Biden administration, who is now pursuing bringing back this Iran nuclear deal along the same measures of what was unenforceable that was passed under Obama.
Yep.
So why we are still trying to appease this theocracy, why we are still trying to appease this murderous state, this state that gets in the streets and its own citizenry starts chanting death to America. Why we still go to the table with them is beyond my understanding.
I mean, what there's like, because what deal are you going to try to make? You know what I mean? Like, what
it benefits us in any way.
Exactly. That's why, I mean, I don't get it either. I only sit this across the table from my enemy when I either know I'm about to rip their throat out. They may not know it at the time, or, you know, there's something that's going to be beneficial for me. I don't understand why you would sit across from someone who is your known enemy with no benefit to you just to make them a better country or a better person.
Well, so part of what that, or part of this whole deal is, I mentioned that they line the streets with these chants and everything like that. You know who's leading the chants? The same guy that they're trying to negotiate with, this Ayatollah. He's the same one that got up there in his little perch there and was leading this Death to America chant. But yet that's who we're sitting at these tables with, trying to make these bargaining positions.
Do you wonder if it's just because of, do you think he wants to change?
Who? The Ayatollah? Absolutely not.
Well, follow this rabbit hole with me real quick. Because I heard this saying a while back, and it was more along the lines of, you know, certain things are in, as a leader, part of your role is to make sure that the values of your people, not just yourself, are held to a higher standard. And there are certain things that that certain leaders may defend or fight for that they may not 100% believe in, but their people believe in it, and they fight for their people. Now, granted, I got this theory somewhere else, but taking that mind frame, what if they're sitting down because, you know, he may be trying to negotiate how to inch it in, but it's in his people's bones that they wanted an Islamic state, that they wanted these things to be enforced. So he has to implement them and then take them to their highest regard and then pull it back.
Well, I would.
It's an interesting consulting theory.
I would say okay, but then you have him coming out again just the other day in a proclamation and saying, you know, we're aware of what's going on. We're working to correct this, but it's not our fault. It's the U.S. and Israel's fault.
Propaganda.
Yes,
because death to America for them, and you know all of that's like throwing red meat. You know,
but if his citizens are chanting that, then it's what the country wants. And if he's leading that chant,
agreed,
that's what he's wanting. Just because the fact that he doesn't want
I'm just thinking of a
throwing.
I'm just thinking of a reason why we would still sit at the table. You
Yeah,
know what
I mean, there's no reason whatsoever.
There's no reason whatsoever unless, you know what I mean, this man is trying to play both sides of the fence, and he's telling the idiots who are sitting there on our side one thing and, you know, his people another. But that's what I'm saying. Like, it would have to be something that blatantly obvious in order for someone like me to want to still sit down and talk to you.
I understand that point, and you know, I could maybe see myself getting behind that if there wasn't the history of him violating every aspect of the deal that he had made previously.
Yeah, he's like Rocket
and
Man.
It's the same thing or it's the same deal that they're trying to come through now. So what's to say that they're not going to violate every part of this deal again? So I see where you're going with that.
Those of you who wonder who I got that theory.
Wholeheartedly.
Those of you who are wondering how I got that theory, it's in season 3 of House of Cards when the guy who's supposed to be Vladimir Putin starts talking to the president of the United States.
Oh, House Cards, interesting one there. But yeah, I cannot for the life of me fathom or understand why it is that we continue to deal with these states and give them very favorable terms and conditions when we get nothing out of it in return. Because if we're going to sit down and make a deal with somebody, we should be getting something in return for it.
That's the whole point of making a deal.
Yes.
Either we all win or we all lose.
Otherwise, why would we even consider it?
That's it.
We just need to sanction the you-know-what out of them and run them back to and make sure they remain the third world country that they are.
You know what, though? And I feel like we have to find a way to do more stringent things than sanctions. Like, you know what I mean? Because this whole UN sanction thing, like, what you may hurt the purse a little bit, but like that's it. They have no weight.
The only thing that you could do beyond that is sending in troops and boots on ground, and that I am 100% opposed to. I will never agree to spilling a drop of American blood outside of our soil unless there is a clear and direct threat, and we have been clearly and directly harmed.
I understand. Because we're coming from two perspectives. You're the vet. I'm a political scientist. Like, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm the type of people who in militarized zones sometimes people don't like, because that's why I like you march on one side of the street versus the other. Like that those are political tactics. And I understand that sometimes most times they are harmful. But it's hard for someone like me to get down with sanctions because I think they're worthless. That's the hard part. I don't think that going to war is the answer, but I know sanctions aren't either. There has to be something that we can find.
Well, sanctions with teeth. You place sanctions on a country that, like, for instance, like kind of like what we are doing with Russia, and to a very small degree. Russia right now is hurting so bad economically because we are not doing as much business as what we're doing with them. In my opinion, I think we need to cut off every single tie to them whatsoever and sink them.
No, I have a differing opinion on that, because here's the thing, right? Russia's hurting economically because Russia made bad policies internally. But financially, they have increased because when they cut us off, when we cut them off and they cut half of Europe off, they went and sold things to India, China, and that profit margin is exponential because of the fact that there are higher populations.
Yes, but
more usage.
That is only for a short term. Those are only very short term gains.
I get that. They still like part of Russia's economic problem though is because
this is interesting because the roles on this right here have completely flipped. Jamie's arguing a very erratic and spontaneous and very momentary movement, whereas I'm talking about the long term game. Like my head's about to explode.
Well, because here's the thing, Russia cannot play a long game, similar with Iran, because long term for them is like Half-Life for us. That's like 20 years. And part of that reason is some of their policies. And what I mean by that is, take our opioid crisis. Okay. We have a opioid crisis in America, and you have to get a prescription for it. Makes it even harder. Okay. They can get Roxy's, Oxycontin, Crocodile, which is a whole nother ball game, like on the street.
Oh, so can we.
Well, what I mean by that
not legally though.
What I mean by that is they can go to like the Russian version of Walgreens and buy it over the counter. And, you know, that in itself, similar to here, has killed the labor force. Now, their labor force got killed way harder, way faster, because they took so long to try to adjust making it over the counter, from over the counter to being a prescription. So when you're dying like that, you got no other option. I got two options. I can try to find new resources, force you to agree with me, or go to war, which all lead to the same thing.
Let's hold off on that one because that's something we'll touch on a little bit later.
Yeah.
But so getting back to kind of like what we were discussing there for a moment, the sanctions deal. Sanctions have proven to work. I mean, so for instance, let's take a look at Cuba. Cuba's stuck in the 1950s because their closest person that they could potentially do any sort of business with is us, and we had completely cut them off whatsoever. So they were essentially stuck in the 1950s for 60, almost 70 years.
Yeah.
So sanctions do work.
Well, I don't think that's was it sanctions or just a lack of care of Cuba from the communist nation?
Well, us cutting the communist nation off from being able to do any business with America killed off any time.
What I'm saying
that
is,
the state could.
What I'm saying is, Cuba couldn't come to us, right? But like how we protect fighting freedom-loving countries, right? You don't see that on the other side. Not until like somewhat recently, where the dictatorships have started to form together. Like I think we'd be in a different ball game if Nicaragua hadn't went down like it did, and if there was another level of support. Now you are right in the fact that, you know, sanctions, because they were the only one on this hemisphere, killed Cuba. Which is why I believe that, you know, us going so hard with the CIA and everybody else to help stop Nicaragua from becoming a true communist nation would have been played out the way that it did. If they had another ally in our hemisphere, we could have been not in trouble by any means, but we could have been in a different situation. We could have been in a war on this hemisphere in the Pan Am.
I see where you're going with that. And like in relating this back to Iran and the fact that if we, as the United States, cut off any economic ties to them, but it would take other nations and other countries around them, their major business dealers, doing the same to really be able to have that. So in a almost kind of a mindset, if the world powers came to be and really applied this pressure without interest in their own in their own stakes, that what they could potentially gain from it, it would work. But at the same time, we're asking folks like Russia, like China, like India to coming to the same table with us and applying these uniformly.
Yep.
And
that's why I think sanctions are garbage. Because here's the thing.
In a perfect world, I guess.
Yeah, if sanctions worked, we wouldn't be ready to bust into World War III right now.
Well, again,
we'll get to that later.
You're jumping the gun.
I'm just got me on my political soapbox.
But as always, we like to remind our listeners to make sure they're hitting the like button and the share button for any of the content that they see, any of the platforms that we produce or put out anything on, and making sure that you're also hitting the subscribe button as well. That way, you stay in contact with us and make sure you're never missing a moment of Jamie's smiling, beaming, characteristic face.
Mm-hmm.
And make sure you're going to conservativestalk.com and hitting the sponsor tab in the upper right-hand corner or the lower right-hand corner and helping us out with what you're able to, because we're only able to remain on and continue to do these because of our sponsorships. So the second topic that we had put on that we were going to talk about, that was SCOTUS batting 500 for their first week. So for those of you who are not aware and who don't live in this world like Jamie and I do, the Supreme Court of the United States held their first round of hearings with their new Supreme Court justice this week. And there were 4 cases that really jumped out at me personally. And I kind of want to touch on some of those and get some input and reactions with some of that. And the first one being, and I'm going to start kind of at the almost kind of the lower level of this and talk about that
from first. Yeah.
And so the first one, well, the second one first, I guess would be the better way of saying that. But so they refused to hear or refused to hear the case in the full Supreme Court to render a verdict involving the bump stock ban. So for those who don't know, at this point in time, I'm sure just about everybody does, that the bump stock ban took effect under Trump after the Las Vegas, Nevada shootings. The guy was up on he was up on one of the high-rise hotel buildings, firing these AR-15s into the crowd, and was able to get off so many shots because of the particular stock that he had, which under the ATF, under the direction of Trump, one of the only policies that I wholeheartedly disagree with him on and would fight him to the nail against, he allowed for the ATF under his direction to change the definition, the meaning, or the understanding involving this one particular product into what a machine gun is.
Yeah.
So if you're not into this as much as I am with some of this, the mechanism that works with that is by placing your finger into the trigger and pulling the trigger. The stock mechanism of this would shift rearward during the recoil and would spring forward and would engage the trigger again while you're not moving your finger. But the motion of the stock would be what would actually fire this thing. So under their ruling or their determination of this, because you were not doing a single motion every time a round was fired of your finger, it was classified as a machine gun. However, reading the actual law, it is not the complete motion of the finger, but yet the motion of the overall mechanism. So they took a very stringent and not really vague at all, a very stringent, or they took a ruling or a meeting under the NFA and really applied it indirectly. And because of that, we have one less firearm accessory that is available to the public. Actually, if you own one now, you are a felon. So just keep that in mind if you do happen to have one. So they refused to hear that case. It's interesting to note that the argument involving this case kind of reminds me of something else, and that being the 2022 EPA ruling, because the argument was that a bureaucracy cannot make a substantial legislative decision without first going through Congress.
See that. And this was something that was made by the ATF.
Yes, a ruling that was made by the ATF.
Huh. And SCOTUS didn't choose to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder why.
I would say that that determination would have been made null and void simply because of the ATF ruling. I mean, the EPA ruling.
It should have been.
Yeah, you would think so. But because of the intricacies,
but it's because no one's brought it up.
Minute detail. Oh no, that was the argument that was made. They just refused to hear it.
Oh, that's why they refused to hear it, though. Because here's
it's an election year too.
Refusing to hear it is the same thing as I don't want to deal with it.
Silence is violence, my friend.
Silence is violence.
So, okay. So right now they're they're 0-4 or 0-1 on these. So the second one that they refused to hear was something that, frankly, we have to be very cautious on in bringing this up and touching on this, because if we are not, we'll get deplatformed and banned.
Oh, you must be talking about the
yes. So they
E-word.
refused to hear the
E-word.
E-word.
E-word. What starts with an E?
I'm thinking M.
Maybe we're talking
for
about
mandate.
Oh.
That they refused to hear the case involving that was actually brought by a slew of states involving the federal vaccine mandate for healthcare workers, even after COVID's over.
I forgot about that one. We were talking about something totally different. Yeah.
They refused to hear that case, or they said that we're not going to pursue a ruling on that. So the lower court decision, or the appeals court decision, stood, which kept that decision, or kept that mandate in place. So even though COVID's over and done with, according to Biden, our healthcare workers still have to have vaccines in order to work in that field. They still have to have a COVID vaccine.
In certain states?
No, nationally. Because this was a federal mandate that was placed. If a healthcare facility receives any sort of Medicare, Medicaid funding, anything along that, any sort of federal funding, their employees must be vaccinated.
Yeah, so like the mandate thing, I have a problem with, but don't they make them take don't private hospitals make them take every shot anyway?
No. So you can have for instance, like
flu shot.
So vaccine. There are some that do have that say that you have to take it, but you can say no. You can say no. I refuse to take that, and they have to take that. They have to. Okay, we really heavily encourage you to do that, but we can't force you to do it. So that is akin to me telling you that you have to have your tonsils removed before you can.
Yeah, like, don't get me wrong. I completely disagree. Like I was,
yes,
I say this all the time. Like universal health care is something from an insurance standpoint is something that we should have done a long time ago. But the problem was when we put a mandate tax inside of it, automatically had a problem. So when we start talking about mandating anything, especially employment for people, we have a problem.
Universal health care?
Universal health care. Yep. Full proponent of it.
Okay, so then that's another one we need to flesh out in the future.
Oh, would love it.
Would
love it.
My mouth just started watering slightly. I'm.
We can truly dabble into this, because when you don't talk about the reduction of national debt, you automatically remove 5% of the population who is still in the workforce, who would not be working if they didn't have to pay for medical costs.
Understand that, but at the same time, you're taking something that would be we would not have to be paying nearly as much as what we are paying if we did not have a national drive or a national mandate on these.
I'm not saying a mandate.
Open market's the only way to make.
I'm not saying
better.
a mandate. Not saying a mandate.
I understand that.
Right. What I'm saying is I'm talking about nationalizing it to where it is as healthcare as a service. Yep. Universal healthcare.
Man, my friend, have you ever been to a VA facility?
What I'm saying is there's a way to do it. Right. And we can flesh that out. That's not what the segment's for.
Yes, that is true. We're getting off topic on that one.
The reality, and I'm going to leave it at this point. You combine a universal healthcare system that's on a state-ran basis and give it to the states to make sure that everything is coordinated inside of its local agencies and what fits each state. You're going to have a very successful program.
Yeah, we are going to have to flesh this out more.
But back to healthcare workers, right?
Yes. So I want to read this quote, and this is coming from the I guess the unsigned majority opinion. So it was 5-4 and it doesn't say who signed on to it, so we don't know where each of the justices landed on this, and they do that for a reason, so they don't want any perception of what might happen in the future.
Yep.
So, and I quote, "The challenge posed by a global pandemic do not follow a federal agency do not allow a federal agency to exercise power that Congress has not conferred upon it. At the same time, such unprecedented circumstances provide no grounds for limiting the exercise of authorities the agency has long been recognized to have." So what they're referring to there is the fact that OSHA and that the healthcare, the National Healthcare Administration has had the long-standing ability, although again not conferred upon it by Congress, to mandate these sort of things. So what they're saying there is that even though Congress or these entities don't have the authority and the power to do it unless Congress tells them to do it, but because they've been doing it for so long, we're not going to take this case up or overturn it.
Prescriptive powers. It's you know, I see that, right? Again, don't agree with mandates, but I do get that ruling. We're definitely going to differ on this one, because here's the thing. OSHA has been telling people what to do from a safety standpoint for its entire existence. So prescriptively, those powers were already given to them by Congress when the agency was formed.
Well, under that logic, EPA has the right to tell you that you cannot build upon a piece of property that has an adjacent wetland that is adjacent to a large body of water.
Nope, because of the fact that the Clean Water Act was inside of how you could do it, right? Here's the difference.
Mm-hmm.
In the act that was written that allows you to disturb wetland areas, there was a process to mitigate it. OSHA, when the agency was formed, was to go out and tell you what you could and could not do.
From a safety standpoint, not a medical standpoint, and telling you that you have to have, and I get that you're not in favor of mandates, and I do, and I'm just arguing the point that they absolutely, this is an overreach of everything they're doing, because Congress did not confer the ability upon them to tell workers that they had to have a medical procedure in order to be able to hold that job. Actually, there are laws in place now that say that if you do discriminate based upon medical procedures or medical maladies or deformities along that line, you are breaking the law and you are discriminating upon an employer, and that's the ADA.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember where ADA goes under, but a lot of that falls under OSHA too. Mm-hmm. So you know what I mean? So like that also goes back to the old government rule. You can't break your own rules if you're the government. That's a whole nother ballgame. But so think about it from just that perspective of the fact of, you know, ADA for disabilities versus mandate for safety of all is the angle that they're taking. And being a healthcare worker, like here's the thing. I couldn't imagine being my profession at that time, because that is an extremely personal choice that you now have to publicize in order to keep your job one way or the other. You either have to tell your employer what you want to do inside or what you have done inside your own body in order to keep your job, or if you cannot work there anymore. So that's an extremely personal choice.
And you have some employers that will leak that information out publicly.
Mm-hmm. Just to like destroy people.
We saw that here in Rome.
Yeah, just to destroy people, right? But
it was Atrium that did that to their employees.
Yeah. Well, was it Atrium at the time?
No, they had already purchased them. Not a big fan. But again, that's just me.
One of the six.
Yeah.
Anyway, that makes sense later.
So moving on to the ones that they did take, or that they are deciding to take
while they're
up,
batting 500,
which are great. So one of them being essentially an affirmative action case, and that case is relating to the or the acceptance practices involving universities, and that they are filling quotas essentially for hire or for accepting students based upon racial their where they fall on the racial diversity spectrum.
Yeah, and how to fill them. Like that's the crazy thing, right? Like if you could do a 23andMe, and so funny quick story. This kind of fits in. Me and my ex-girlfriend, college sweetheart, someone used to always tell us that we had Nigerian features, right? And he would always try to talk to us. He was from Nigeria. He'd always try to talk us into like applying to do a 23andMe because the country of Nigeria was like, we will give you dual citizenship if you can prove that you're a certain percentage. And so we would always laugh about it because, like, think about all the scholarships that you can get for just checking a box. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, you could look, as some people say, from the mountains of Caucasus, but as long as you can prove that you have like the Southern one drop rule, right? Like, as long as you could prove it, you could get it. Like, which is the craziest thing in the world to me. Like, is that
Looks
really
like
who
you got a dot of the tar brush?
Yeah.
Little Aziz and
Yeah.
Zara there.
Yeah. Little complected.
But this one's so interesting to me, and the reason why I really chose to highlight and emphasize this is that there have actually been rulings that conflict with this. So there have been rulings involving the acceptance practices of universities in hitting specific quotas for racial diversity in their schools that say that you both can do it to some extent, yet there are others that say you absolutely cannot do it to a certain extent. And it all involves the practices and how you implement this and how it's gone about and how it's done.
Damn, you just made a correlation. What if it's financial? Here's what I mean. Okay. There's a certain percentage of students, regardless of race, who are going to be wealthy enough in order to pay for their own school. There's also a certain percentage of students who, for whatever reason, largely minorities, like myself when I was there, who have to take Pell Grants or other things of that nature, which are, in a sense, guaranteed funds. Because if you accept a student with a certain ethnicity or a certain background, and you say that we're going to meet this quota, right, as a university, you just guaranteed your bottom line.
So the facts of this case, and I believe these are correct. I just, in all honesty, I've been aware of this is coming, but I haven't really delved that deeply into the backstory of it. But I believe that it is a Asian organization that's bringing this suit against Harvard and saying that Harvard is discriminating against the Asians who, if they're applying for that school, a lot of those families are proportionally a lot more wealthy than any other family.
Yeah.
So it would be in their benefit to accept more of them, but yet they are not,
because they can't fix their bottom line. Do you get what I mean?
I do, but it's a
little bit more than that, because they're highly rejecting one race over another, one minority group over another, because they are,
and that minority and this one that they're rejecting has the likely ability or
selling higher than
statistically the statistical ability to pay for the school themselves, as opposed to having to go through federal funding. So there is a much higher likelihood that they are going to get a larger cost or a larger profit line there.
I gotta make sure. Well, it feeds the system, right? Run the train, feed the beast. So if you're not taking federal money, you're not replenishing the system that gives you federal money. So hear me out, right? Because if you don't have so many students take out federally loaned debts that they have to pay back to the federal government, versus paying for it themselves or taking it out from a private company without a federal subsidized loan, then you're not paying the beast again, which completely destroys the Department of Education.
So, and I'm
I know I'm speculating.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Are you advocating?
I'm not advocating.
Okay, that's where. Okay, that's where I was.
No.
Now we're on the same page.
No. I'm not advocating for this at all.
Okay.
I'm trying to explain.
I got you now.
Like why would a university? Here's the thing. Okay, because you were saying
got my blood pressure up.
Yeah, no. What universities are saying right now, which is why we have to get to this ruling, is that discrimination is okay in certain instances.
Mm-hmm. So get this. What was it? It was 2000. I want to say 2006, maybe. Somewhere around about there. So it wasn't too terribly long ago. No, it may have been 2000. 2000 early teens, maybe 2013. Anyway, it was Fisher v. Texas. It was. And there are actually two cases that were brought up against this: Fisher v. Texas 1, Fisher v. Texas 2, where the University of Texas denied this white girl admission because it had not met its diversity quotas that it had. Well, not diversity quotas.
That's what it is.
It was not that they said that they did not have specific quotas, but they did not meet their diversity goals. So they denied her entry in the school. So she sued because it's racial discrimination.
Yeah.
But because of footnote 4 in a previous ruling under Sandra Day O'Connor,
yeah,
it was put through with affirmative action saying, hey, because of racial disparities over the past years, it is okay to some point that these diversity quotas or these diversity goals are set and obtained. So yeah, so that's one that they have agreed to take up. Another one, and in all honesty, quite frankly, the most important one that I think that's going to be heard this year, and that involves big tech censorship.
Yeah.
So Texas had passed a law that said big tech cannot censor anybody on their political views because that is a violation of persons. Well, it's just essentially a violation of the fundamentals of liberty or freedom because you can't have private organizations and companies are not subject to violation of free speech.
Yeah.
So they said it's a violation of liberty, it's a violation of freedom. We're passing a law saying you can't do it. Well, these organizations led by Meta said that, okay, well, guess what? We're going to file suit and say that you are violating our free speech and that you are essentially violating Section 230 of the Federal Communications Act.
Yeah.
So
the enemy.
Yes, exactly. So I'm curious to see, and this one right here is going to be a really big one that I really want to keep a close eye on because this could have dramatic impacts because these social media companies, these information giants like Google are no law. If they uphold this or they uphold the law that was passed in Texas, these companies are not going to be able to say, because you think this one way, we're not going to allow you to have access, or we're not going to give you as much of a voice. So you're really, under this new law, you're allowing for a wider and much broader ability to get the town square or the town communication network going and building out to where people can become more informed of a much broader and wider array of information.
Well, because so their argument has always been people who think one way are closed-minded, right?
Yes.
And that's the same way for them. They just refuse to look at it that way because if you're not willing to look at all perspectives, you're just as closed-minded as the people that you're trying to say are closed-minded.
And this has really exacerbated our cognitive dissonance in this country.
Correct. Right. But especially now that we cut the cord, because you're only getting the content that you want, and they're only putting out on certain platforms the content that they want. And they saw that niche, which is why shows like ours, Net News Network getting bigger, Vet Voice, Conservative Television of America, like all these new things, True Social, all these things that are popping up now are because, people like us realize, hey, they are going to censor us on their platform. It's time for us to build our own.
Yes.
And so Section 230, which is we've talked about in access before, but something like this goes against what it means for free speech, what it means for liberty. Upholding this and allowing them to continue to do this only drives home a polarization between the parties, which is why I think it's going to be good to like have this debate out, because this is like a true stance on internet liberties as an individual, because the only way we can connect in our community truthfully now is through the internet. You can say nobody really goes out anymore. You only hang out with a certain small knitted group of people. So the only way you like truly meet anyone new that you would not meet any other way is through a social form of a network on the internet.
That has unfortunately become the world we live in.
Yep.
But we will see how that comes, and we will definitely track that and keep everyone up to date with it. But as always, we also like to remind everyone to make sure they are liking and sharing any of the content that we produce and put out on any of the platforms that we do. Make sure you're also hitting the share button and subscribe button. That way you can stay up to date on anything that we do produce and put out there, and you'll never miss a moment of Jamie's smiling, glorious face there. Also, make sure you're going to our website at conservativetalk.org and hitting that sponsor tab and helping us out with what you're able, so Jamie and I can continue to make these productions and put these out for your viewing and informative pleasures. So let's talk one about that kind of.
It's on polarized card.
Exactly. So you got yours with you? I got mine. Somewhere it's here somewhere.
A silent majority card somewhere, but that's
okay. Fair enough. Okay, so this, and I pulled a lot of this information from an AJC article. I'll go ahead and say that first offhand. I do read the AJC. They do have something that they are good in reporting at both local things and national things, and it's good to at least be able to find content or find stuff that I can read and see that's going on, where I don't have to fish out from a wide variety. I take what they are saying about what's going on with a very fine grain of salt, but the fact that I can find that is what is actual, or find out that events are happening and going on, is good.
And I just want to take this time to remember to boycott hometown headlines.
Yes, absolutely.
But yeah, no, continue.
Other than them, yes. So they had an article that they had published that was talking about, in all honesty, it's another case that's going to be heard here before the Supreme Court here soon, I think. The Supreme Court had actually already rendered a ruling once on this, and it involves the redistricting of the congressional seats in Alabama.
Yeah.
So if you're not aware, there are 7 congressional seats in Alabama. Of those, one of the 7 is Democrat leaning, and the other 6 are Republican leaning. So the argument is that the minority population, or the black population of Alabama, has grown to a level to where they are demanding an additional majority minority seat. So they have one that, because of the Voting Rights Act, it mandates that you have some of these districts there to get away from some of the gerrymandering and some of the discrimination that was going on and was practiced. We'll be blatantly honest.
To where that, at least one seat has to be a predominantly similar voting block.
Well,
I'm phrasing it that way for a reason.
Yeah, the communities must be kept together.
Correct. And that's why I said it that way, because they could have been at the time Republican when this was created, or Democrat, or whatever. But the idea behind it was that these communities of minorities or whoever were like-minded had their own representation that fit them.
Mm-hmm. So the minority population in the state of Alabama is 27% right now. So if you take the one seat that they have in Alabama that is a majority minority seat, and what is that? That is in, I want to say, Montgomery, I believe. And you look at it, it is 55% minority, made of 55% minority. And that one seat is 14% of all the congressional seats that they have. So if you take what they have there and double that, you get 28%,
which is 27.
Exactly. So,
1.
But at the same time, what their argument is that they want and demand that these majority seats, which according to the state legislature in Alabama, would take parts of Alabama from the southeastern coastal area and connect it to the western area of the state.
So run across the bottom?
No, not across the bottom. Well, I guess it would be a sliver cross, kind of like what we had in Georgia, or the congressional district that we currently live in, where we used to be part of Macon with the congressional district under Gingrey.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it would look something along that line there. So you're taking a coastal region and putting it with a farming region and saying that these two people or these two areas need to be represented by the same member of or by the same member of Congress because of their ethnicity, not because of their needs as constituents of the state of Alabama.
Now backfire. That's we face that problem as Republicans down in Florida. District 2 is a big thing like that. You know, the Redneck Yacht Club that we all refer to it, if you know it as, if you go down there, you know it, Panama City, right? One of my favorite places in the world. That congressional district ran all the way to Tallahassee. And if you know anything about those two communities, they are extremely different. And so to have eventually one will outweigh the other one, right? And so you're looking at a more of a rule, though it may be minority populated, right? Their views are probably going to match more of what conservative leaning would be with a more left leaning minority population on the other side. Eventually, one's going to overtake the other, and being in Alabama, it's going to have the opposite effect than what it did in Florida.
Yes, and it's also, in all fairness, it would be seen as unconstitutional under the 14th Amendment, being that everyone is supposed to be equal under the eyes of the law, and because of how they are wanting these new districts to be done and the way they're dividing it up just plainly based upon race is disgusting.
Well, and that's how they do it. You know, they'll pull a race card on anything. That's just the left's MO. It's almost like trauma drama. You know, this has been my biggest disagreement with that party as a whole, is because it's like everyone who runs it is still stuck in the 60s. And for whatever reason, that trauma drama, like, I get it. Like, wow, like everybody goes through stuff, you know, like it sucks. Like it was not the same level, not going to take it away, but everyone experiences racism or sees it at some point in their life. It just is what it is. But when you let that trauma hold you to the point to where you now want to affect and change a country based upon an ideology that the people who vote you in don't believe in anymore, you're getting out of line.
Yeah, and I also want to say that I think that it is this organization that is bringing this suit. I'd say that it's actually more racist of them to assume that this black population is only going to be voting for Democrats there.
I'm telling you, like I promise you, if we probably open this up and look at that area, because that area votes right now majority, otherwise they wouldn't have a Republican
everything.
You know what I mean?
Literally.
So like, I don't think they're really like paying attention to the math. They're just trying to gain it. They're only looking at the math, right?
What they're trying to do there is they're trying to take Montgomery, split Montgomery, from looking at what the argument was on that, taking Montgomery, splitting it in half, and creating two liberal leaning congressional districts there that are centrally focused around Montgomery. as opposed to having the one minority majority district and having the other contingent congressional districts that are around it.
Because they want to they want to build a left-leaning metropolitan area.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Even the representative from the 7th congressional district there, Democrat, said, I would love to have another colleague from my state on my side when I'm making these arguments for Alabamans.
I had a friend down in Prattville we're going to have to call.
Does he still live there? I thought he was in Tennessee.
No, this is another friend.
Ah, got you. But yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous how they're doing this. So, and get this. So a 3-judge panel that had 2 Trump appointees on it had gotten together earlier this year and told the state of Alabama that it had to redraw its district lines before the primary election. So the state of Alabama, they appealed it up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, no, you don't have to redraw it. It's too close to the primaries. It would drastically affect everything. So the election will happen this time around. The districts will stay the same, but the likelihood that, well, whether or not these districts could change is going to be up to Congress for 2024. Or it's going to be up to the Supreme Court
if they choose to hear it in 23.
Yep.
That's really interesting. That's a game changer.
Oh, yes. And it's also interesting to note that the districts that are drawn almost mirror the same districts that were drawn previously that all of these minority groups that are now suing had agreed to.
Oh, so similar to how basically we're getting to more flaws inside the Voter Rights Act that continue to show up, because we've seen things happen, especially in Northwest Georgia, where some people, fought for a settlement that was later come back and changed. Now that's getting ready to bite them in the butt.
Mm-hmm.
Similar actions of where when you hold on to that drama, you realize that this could be more detrimental to your cause in the long run.
Yep. And you try and come back and change your position, your standings, and the rules after the fact.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So no, that's very interesting. That's another one that we're really going to have to pay close attention to with that. And talking about paying close attention, we always like to remind all of our viewers to make sure they remember to hit the like button and the share button on any of the productions they see out there. Make sure you're also subscribing to any of our platforms that you do see our productions on. That way you'll never miss a show. You'll stay up to date with everything. And Jamie will always know that you're there to see that beautiful smile he has.
I check our views.
Exactly. And he does too, actually. Also, make sure you're going to conservativestalk.org, our website there, and hitting the sponsor tab and helping us out with what you're able to, because every bit of that brings us right back into helping to produce more of these shows and get out more content and keep you up to date with what's going on in our heads, which can be kind of a dangerous thing.
Especially now that we're about to start this next segment. Are you ready?
Yes, let's do it.
All right. So, Buck, I'm sorry I have to steal your thunder for a second, but here's the thing, right? And here's what I was getting back to beforehand. When we start talking about like what's going on and why I cannot stand sanctions, okay, is because the process inside of the UN currently, in order to pass a sanction, you might as well have just gone to war. You might as well just go to war.
Well, that's inside the UN.
Well, it's across the same thing. Okay. Like, so we had more, if we had enacted tariffs, right? Similar to what we did with the trade deal with China, right? Those are more effective than trying to issue sanctions.
Okay.
And to modern political scientists, they're like, oh, that's barbaric. No one would ever do this. This is how the borders are supposed to be ran, but we wouldn't have the theories. We wouldn't have what we are now without those types of conflicts.
So what your argument is, and correct me if I'm misunderstanding this, is that we still allow for trade to go on with these organizations, yet we just throw a higher tax on them, which translates into the buyers here in the States not purchasing as much of that product. So the buyers or the retailers here are not purchasing as much from them, as opposed, and that being through the tariffs. But then you have the sanctions aspect of it, to where we can just say, no, you cannot under any circumstances do any business for any business here in the United States. You cannot do any business with this other organization, this other entity whatsoever, regardless of taxes.
What I'm saying is that through the tariff process, it already sends a message, because part of the problem that we have now is that we will sit here and wait until, oh, we're just going to pull a sanction, right? At the same time, as if you're paying attention to how the other chess pieces are moving, then you say, hey, you know what? We see what you're doing over there. It's time for us to start talking about a tariff on your trade. That automatically, years ago, decades ago, you know what? Honestly, being honest, the moment that Putin came over and said, you know, Ukraine is not a country, right? Crimea is not a country. When they had won their independence was the moment we probably should have slapped them with a tariff.
So the way you put it there, what I think was the most effective way that you've fought for this. Yes, because what you're talking about there is a preemptive measure as opposed to a reactive.
Correct. Which is why I feel that sanctions are not effective, is because that's just like saying, oh, okay, you've gone too far, I cut you off. Right? You're acting like a spoiled brat. Well, right. Whereas
I would agree with that in the sense of, as long as those sanctions come in a reactive standpoint, but if they are put into a preemptive standpoint, they can be used to control.
So are you saying that you just wouldn't do any trade with them altogether from the beginning?
Yes. Well, not from the beginning, from the moment they started positioning in regard to Russia and Ukraine, the moment they started to line Ukraine's border, just saying none whatsoever. And then, or even before that, you start to see them start ramping up the rhetoric that they're going to be doing this. And like, okay, well, we're going to draw down on your ability to do our with the IMF. We're going to limit your access to funds, so you're not able to raise the money in order to buy new weaponry, things along that nature. Reactive things as opposed to
the U.S.
preemptive things as opposed to
comparing Russia and the U.S., right? Because there's always been no love lost there.
No,
right? That's kind of hard, right? So think about this, and I feel that for really what I'm going for, Europe would be the best example. Okay, Europe, to slap a sanction on it now is stupid.
Yes, now.
Yes, because absolutely. You know what I mean? Because like they have been moving in, they moved into Crimea, they have been like bullying your region this entire time, and you are still like sucking up 38% of your entire fossil fuel intake was from them. So you didn't care. You don't care about Ukraine, you don't care about Crimea, you don't care about Jordan, you don't care about the rest of that region unless they signed on to NATO because you made a deal with them, right? So stop lying, because you were still like giving up 38%.
I've heard that line a bunch today. But so I think what we're agreeing here on is that preemptive measures far outweigh reactive measures.
Absolutely. I think the reactive measures of using sanctions is ridiculous. You should be paying more attention to what's going on. Now flashing forward, right, to what is now, okay? It's still in the same line of, oh, now let's fast track Ukraine, when 8 years ago, when they started asking to be a part of NATO, we said no.
Yes, and that in of itself draws some very serious consequences if this is done and approved. Was it Sweden and Finland just joined? So if Ukraine joins, then Sweden and Finland were fast tracked through. I mean, within
weeks,
within a month of them applying, they were part of NATO. If the same happens with Ukraine, that is going to require that the U.S. come in and wage war against Russia.
As a political tactic, right? This is a last ditch effort. Okay. And here's what I mean by that. an IR, right?
That's international relations.
Yeah, sorry, an IR. The nothing turns approval ratings up and makes more money than going to war.
Yes,
because it increases and boosts defense contract stock, which a lot of individuals hold. It showing good signs of standing as a strong leader that bumps your approval ratings to a certain percentage. Being able to say that you were able to defeat a large scale enemy also bumps your approval ratings. So it's always a last ditch effort a lot of times to see a president or an administration start talking about conflict or being involved in conflict. Now, though we in America have not had that direct communication to do so, like going along with now, late in the game, for NATO to be for Ukraine to be a part of NATO and us having to join in, that's a similar play, because they're not that whole new Western ideology that they're trying to maintain is crumbling in a sense. You're seeing this nationalist movement across Europe. You're seeing it in the US, where people want to make sure that we are protected first as a nation before we start going and fighting everyone else's battle. So this whole like globalization ideology is dying. What's the fastest way to do it? Well, someone we can swoop up real quick that's already in the middle of a war, let's make them a member so we can already enact Article 5 and go to war with them.
Yeah. So a great example of the fact of what he was talking about there and the economic booms that you see involving warfare is the U.S. pre-World War II. We were in the midst of the Great Depression.
Yeah. Well,
World War II secured us as the global dominant powerhouse. That's literally, I mean, that is what rose us to the leading ranks of the world, was World War II and our involvement in it. And that was through production through the military-industrial complex.
Yep, military-industrial complex and the Lend-Lease Act. Mm-hmm. Because the ideology behind the IMF and everything that was created was, okay, now we're going to lend money to Europe because Europe was decimated.
Yep.
We gave Churchill funds and then boom.
Yes. So the reason why this should really scare a lot of folks, or I say scare, should really be concerning to a lot of folks, is the fact that
it should scare you.
Yeah, well, they are talking about, or Putin's talking about the use of nuclear weapons. Putin's biggest supporters, his closest confidants, the dictators that he's installed in other areas are encouraging him to start using these weapons. Even a low yield or low grade military weapon like that, or a nuclear weapon like that, is going to leave such decimation that it is beyond fathom. I mean, we haven't had anything even remotely close to that since us when we dropped two on
Hiroshima.
Yeah, and Nagasaki in Japan. Nothing like that on a global scale has ever been seen since then. And they are now talking about these and seriously talking about this and seriously using, considering using these massive weapons of mass destruction. What we invaded another country because we suspected that they might have some there. Turned out they didn't, but we created an entire war based upon the assumption that they might have some. So the fact that they are now seriously discussing this and considering this, and the fact that Russia has the largest stockpile of these weapons in the entire world, is of major concern, because if they use one there, you can guarantee the likelihood that we will also use one against them. And it's not that so I was watching on one of the shows the other night, they're talking about how if they use a low-grade nuclear device, we're going to take out their ships. We're going to take out their fleet.
No, bro, I'm bombing their capital city.
We will hit major military targets in their territorial areas.
This ain't battleship. Country. This is war.
No,
like you know what I mean. Like
it will be done.
And that, I think that's the thing that a lot of people are missing, is that this isn't some there is no like game to this. This isn't a tick for tack. This isn't checkers. Like you're not going to bomb an ally and then we're going to come over here and go, okay, well, we'll do our turn and then we're going to allow you to do another turn. No, that's not how we play ball.
The moment they do, the moment they use a low-grade nuclear device in Ukraine is the exact same moment they use one here in the United States. They will be done simultaneously. They will be done at the same exact time.
They'd have to. And then the next thing that's going to happen is
the end of the world.
For them.
No, for the world. Because we will respond. We will respond with our full might. They will respond with their full might at the same time. And it's the entire reason why NATO was set up as mutually assured destruction.
I feel you. I just don't think that by the time we get ready to use our full might, they're going to live and they won't have time to react.
Their capabilities match ours, and in some areas exceed ours.
So we hear that a lot, but you know what? If they did, they should have beat Ukraine a long time ago. Just being honest.
Well, they have been implementing some of these more and more now.
They may have. Okay.
I'm not saying everything they have is to that level, but it doesn't take everything they have.
Correct.
And it only takes a small portion.
Correct. They may have the capabilities, the technology, right? But do they have the mental capacity to pull off the strategy? Like that's still to be unseen.
Well, they haven't been backed all the way into the corner just yet. And when you're backed all the way in the corner, there's nowhere out but the most
which is what they're prepared for,
way.
Right?
That's what they're talking about. Yes.
And the moment that they reinstilled the partial draft was the moment two things happened in my mind. When Russia reinstilled the partial draft, everybody under 30 pretty much had to go get ready to suit up. That told me two things: that they are losing the war on their own, and that there's only one other way, and that is the option that we're talking about.
Yeah, it's at this point in the game, it's either total defeat or the nuclear option. And that's one of the things that really kind of resonates, or if it becomes to the point to where Americans have to go into Ukraine, or Americans are going into Russia, or we're intervening in direct boots on the ground area, and that is the moment that, in all honesty, Buck makes a pretty convincing argument that the Democrats are pushing for, because of the economic gains that would be made from that, the political gains that would be made from that, the supportive gains that could be made from that. And we're seeing that our economy right now is in shambles. So the economic boom would be very much welcomed. You're, like Jamie was talking about, you see a dwindling approvalship of a president and him going up against this big, bad, powerful bully, this boogeyman, and fighting against him boost your approval ratings through the roof. Oh, look what happened to your mentor, George Bush. Terrible approval ratings until we invaded Iraq. Afterwards, through the roof.
That's what got him a second term.
Mm-hmm. Wartime presidents are always beloved.
Wartime presidents are always beloved. It's also interesting to note that there's also this theory in IR that globalism is phased. Okay. We are really sitting in an area to where there are, quote unquote, too many superpowers, because you can have an area split into 4, then 2, then 1 world. So by Russia going in, Russia doing the nuclear option, you really create, and what we're starting to see is an Eastern versus Western ideology, more so than a national or cultural ideology. And the expansion of this is my biggest fear, the expansion of us adding NATO, increasing NATO, adding Ukraine at this time only reinstills that, which is why I think they want us to push the red button. Them doing that, all that does is still drives home this idea of we have to save the world. You know what I mean? Because now it's us versus them, when it was really them versus them, and we were over here.
That is understandable.
You know what I mean?
I mean, that's been one of America's greatest defenses is the fact that we were an ocean away.
Yep.
That's been our biggest defense.
Yep.
But as always, we have reached that inevitable point in every one of our episodes, and that is the end. So we want to make sure that you, again, are liking and sharing all of our productions that we produce on any platform that you do run across them. And while you are running across them on these platforms, make sure you're hitting the subscribe button. That way you can stay up to date with everything that we put out. You'll never miss a show, and you'll always be able to see Jamie's smiling face. If you're able to, please go to our show at conservativestalk.org and make sure you're hitting the sponsor tab in the upper right hand corner or the lower right hand corner and helping us out with what you're able, because it's our sponsorships that really drive us and help us be able to expand our word. And speaking of expanding our word, we want to say a quick thank you to Net News Network. They are our national affiliate and help us reach a national audience. Thank you to Veterans for America First, the America First policy political organization that is fighting tooth and nail to make sure that we are well protected for the next 100 million years. And
yes,
also make sure you're searching for their media platform on any social media sites, and that is Vet's Voice. You'll find America First content creators. You'll only find America First content creators, actually. And make sure you're following as much of them as possible. They come highly recommended, and you will love everything that they do. So, Jamie, you want to jump right into your favorite part of the show again?
Yeah, I'm down. 34 days until we cancel Stacey Abrams. 300 calls a day. Keep Stacey away.
That's Jamie's new mantra.
That's it.
So, with what would that ever show? Jamie, would you like to close us out with any particular words of wisdom other than 300 calls a day?
102.
I almost forgot.
Good
You'll
night.
know when you know.